Hi, my name's Dave Hadfield, and I'm about to start this Mark 9 Spitfire. The job today is to fly an air display at the Great Lakes International Airshow in St. Thomas, Ontario. It's time to start the big 60 series Merlin, so I'm priming it. It takes 5 or 6 pumps to bring fuel to the primer, and then 3 or 4 good ones to deliver fuel to the engine, and I leave the primer out so that after the start, if it goes to quit, I've got 1 charge left to keep it going. That sound was the CF-18 Hornet flying overhead, which means I'm just about on deck, so it's time to close the cockpit door so it won't bang against the fuselage after the engine starts, and get it cranking. Clear! Stick trap behind my left elbow, 2 fingers on the booster coil and the starter, and right hand on the primer, and round she goes. This Merlin is a gem. The overhauler's got everything right. It just loves to start. From the outside, it doesn't look like I'm doing very much, but I'm moving through the after start check, making sure the oil pressure is good, the fuel pressure is good, and configuring the instrument panel left to right, top to bottom for flight. You know, as soon as the engine starts on one of these World War II fighters, they say your IQ drops by about half, so we use checklists before departure. You notice I'm moving my head around a lot as we start to taxi, and the reason for that is you simply can't see. The Merlin sticks up very high. The camera on my helmet is about 2 inches higher than my eyeball, so the visibility is even worse than you see on the screen. I use my marshallers. I stick my head out the cockpit left and right to see where I'm going. I make big S turns, weaving back and forth, and I'm super careful not to run into something. Tickets are just $4. In about 15 minutes, I'm going to be flying formation with that de Havilland Vampire, so I give the guys a wave, and I'm really glad to see they're ready to go. Okay, now it's time for the run-up, and I got to see 30 degrees Celsius in the oil and 60 on the coolant before I can push the throttle up. A Spitfire is a very nose-heavy airplane, far more so than a Mustang. At this point, I'm taking the parking brake off because if the tail started to lift during the run-up, my only recourse would be to yank the power off and release the parking brake while holding the stick back and hopefully keep the propeller from hitting the pavement. So I hold the brakes, push the power up to about 1800 RPM, and then cycle the propeller from fine pitch to coarse several times to move warm oil through the propeller hub. Mag checks are good, engine running smooth on both individual ignition systems, and then we check the fuel pressure and the ammeter to make sure everything's good before we bring the power back to idle. And we keep this run-up check as short as possible because it heats up the engine, and a Spitfire does not cool well on the ground at all. It's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit in St. Thomas today. So we move right into the pre-takeoff check. Navigation lights are off, rudder and elevator trim are set for takeoff. We check the throttle tension firm so that the throttle won't creep back while I'm raising the gear after takeoff. We check that the flaps are up, fuel's on, fuel cutoff is forward for flight, the wing tanks are off, and the controls are free. Well, the air boss says the airspace is ours, so out we go to the runway. That crackling noise is just air striking the helmet cam's microphone. It'll go away once we start flying. One good check to make sure it's clear ahead before we go, and we're all set. Now let's listen to the sound of this Spitfire on takeoff. Okay, we're nicely away. Gears up, speed established. We could have used 11 pounds of boost for takeoff, but we only used 6, and that was plenty. Now to climb, we bring it slowly back to 4 pounds of boost, and from 3,000 RPM back to 2,400. And now it's time to get the canopy closed, and then take stock of engine temperatures and pressures, and make sure we're okay for the show. Okay, we've had time now to maneuver the airplane a little bit and warm ourselves up. The engine temperatures and pressures are still looking good, and it's time to roll in on the show line. There's St. Thomas Airport just coming into view, and I'm setting up the first maneuver, which is a topside pass from left to right. We are aiming at the corner marker and letting down to arrange our altitude to be about 100 feet above the ground by center stage. The speed's coming up. I'm aiming for about 250 miles an hour. Not too fast, not too slow. If I get too fast, then I just go whipping through everybody's field of view too quickly. If I'm too slow, then I can't hold the line long enough.
Hadfield in the Spitfire.
Most of this air display will be close-in maneuvering, showing off the Spitfire's wonderful agility and low-speed handling characteristics. The show line is that runway right there, and I'm not allowed to cross it. All turns, all maneuvering has to be away from the crowd. I roll out pointing at the corner marker, which is just beyond the snowbirds there. And before I reach the show line, I pull the nose up hard into a great big lovely coordinated swooping wing over. Takes me up and up and up. Now, as I pull it around, I let the nose down through the horizon. Speed starts to increase. I point down towards the center of the grass triangle, and I'm aiming at the other corner marker. And before I cross the show line, up we go again. I'm not allowed to do aerobatics at this air show, even though I've done lots of them in the past, particularly in the P-40. But this Spitfire is pretty much right out of the shop, almost brand new, and there wasn't time this spring to gain the accreditation required in order to perform aerobatics in front of an air show crowd. But the photographers sure seem to like what I'm doing here now. They love the fact that I'm right in front and that I'm always rolling and pitching and changing the angles so they can get a dozen new shots on every pass. And for the crowd, the sound of the Merlin is really important as well. And in this kind of display, it's always changing because you're either coming towards the crowd where the sound is rising or maneuvering away so it's falling off again. The Spitfire does these kind of maneuvers really well, probably better than any other airplane I've flown. It has tremendous low-speed handling characteristics. If you get slow at the top of these maneuvers, like right here, and then you pull a little G, the airplane's not very likely to do a flick roll or snap or depart controlled flight. It tells you very gently through a little buzzing in the stick that you're asking too much, and all you do is ease off again and you're flying. It's a very low-threat way to do an airshow routine. And also, when you lower the nose in a Spitfire, that slim wing and the big engine allows it to accelerate quickly. I've done this kind of display in the P-40 and the Hawker Hurricane, but for the pilot, the way a Spitfire performs it is just exceptional. Sometimes there are complications for an airshow pilot. You see those houses just below us to the right? Well, we couldn't persuade those people to go to the beach for the day. So as a result, I have to be 1,000 feet above their homes and then descending through 1,000 feet on the way back in. Bottom side pass. It is such a privilege to be displaying this aircraft. It's the only Spitfire flying in Canada. It's part of the Mike Potter Aircraft Collection, which is located at the Gatineau Airport, across the river from Ottawa, and operates in association with Vintage Wings of Canada, a registered charity, which anyone can visit. The aircraft are magnificent and they fly. It's a private collection. It exists with no government funding, and it's staffed entirely by volunteers, and they are devoted people determined to keep Canadian aviation history alive.
Once again, you can see those very distinctive D-Day invasion stripes. I mentioned that that was to avoid friendly fire by crews on the grounds. Wanted to make sure they weren't shooting at friendly aircraft.
Okay, time to wrap this up and move to part 2, which is the formation flight with the Vampire. So I'll circle around here, line up with the runway, and do a fast wing wag pass right down the flight line. Now Derek Hammond has got airborne in the Vampire. He's done his routine and he's called last pass. And I've been watching him from the dead airspace on the north side of the airfield and trying to position myself so I can do an interception and a formation rejoin. And I've never been a fighter pilot, so this is fun. I'm at 3,000 feet. He's at about 300 feet, so I got lots of energy in the bank. I'm watching the Vampire and trying to get the angles judged just right. Looks good to me, so the nose goes down and the speed goes up. This is a remarkable pairing of aircraft. Hasn't happened in Canada in at least 40 years, to my knowledge. And in a wonderful coincidence, we were both painted in the colors of 442 Squadron RCAF. 2 periods, but same squadron. And that squadron's still flying today. So Derek starts the run in for a topside pass. We're not doing anything too ambitious today. We haven't had a lot of chance to practice. This is more for the sake of history than performance.
Of our formation of the Spitfire and the Vampire from our right.
I wish I had my helmet cam on the other side so you could get a better view. Derek Hammond is flying a nice, smooth, steady lead. Even though it's a hot summer day with all kinds of gusts and thermals, we're very close to Lake Erie. The air's not stable, but he's doing a great job. It's a hot, bumpy, rough day. But we've been having fun, and now it's time for the formation break. So just as we approach center field, Derek will pull up. Yep, there he goes. And he'll pop to the right, and I'm staying low, and I pull to the left, and that way we have separation. I'm on final now, and I'm making S-turns in order to see the runway. As soon as the speed comes back like this, I can't see anything in the landing environment. Derek has landed in the Vampire, and there are some other aircraft movements happening as well. I won't land off this pass. This will be a low break where I fly alongside the runway and then pull up hard to the left, join the circuit, and configure for landing. We try not to just yank the throttle off in any of these World War II fighters. It's very hard on the engine. So instead, we try and slow down aerodynamically, and that's the reason for this brake. But in this case, it also looks good in front of the crowd. There's Derek on the runway. And here's the pole. Abeam the runway, downwind, speed below 160. We extend the gear and check it. We open the canopy because this allows emergency exit if there was a problem after landing, and also allows us to move our head left and right a little bit more to aid visibility. Then we extend the flap, which in a Spitfire is an all or nothing switch. In most of the World War II fighters, we don't fly a square circuit because on final you can't see in front of you, as you saw earlier. So when the wingtip is just past the runway, we start a gentle, continuous descending turn to touchdown. This keeps the landing environment in view until you're right over the runway. The airspeed is continuously monitored and adjusted right till touchdown. I'm going to be about 140 on the downwind leg, slowing to 120 at the 90-degree point, and then to about 110 as you roll out on final, and 90 miles an hour over the threshold. The Spitfire is one of those airplanes that 3 points very well, and that's a good thing because the gear legs are short and the prop blades are long. So once over the end of the runway, it's power off and stick back and back and back until it touches down. And if it does a little bit of a hop and a skip, we just raise the flaps and then we're instantly stable on the pavement. This is the only Spitfire I've ever flown, but I was absolutely delighted to find out that it tracks straight as a die after landing. Very little rudder work during the rollout, and it's not trying to get you. It's an absolute pleasure. But we do not hammer on the brakes or even pump them aggressively after landing. We let the airplane slow down aerodynamically. Towards the end of the landing roll, we do try the brakes gently, slow down till we can accomplish a safe 180, and then taxi back. Now the trick here is to get back before the thing overheats, because all the heat that's been soaked up by that engine core is now coming out rapidly into the coolant. The radiators work very well in the air, but very poorly on the ground. And if that coolant gets up to 120 degrees Celsius, I have to shut the engine down no matter where I am. In this case, with a long taxi back on a hot day, it's kind of a race. Can I get to the parking bay in time before the coolant overheats? And the answer is no, I can't. I get onto the ramp, I get close, I pull the cutoff, I glide the last few feet, and after that I start looking for volunteers. That's all you get out of a Spitfire on a hot day after landing. It's about to boil.